Good morning, Middle Church. Happy Lunar New Year, Gung Hee Fa Choi. Our sermon today is an interpretation of the scripture that we just heard that Vicky read for us. It is an interpretation of the story of the transfiguration of Jesus Christ through a Confucian lens. Many of you know that Confucianism is a school of thought. It's a philosophical school. It's an ethical system. It is not a religion that has deeply influenced East Asian cultures, namely Chinese, Korean, and Japanese cultures. And in the retelling of this story, I've crafted a fable in the style of a Chinese folktale. And in crafting this fable, I've drawn upon Confucian resources. So anytime you encounter a thought that is ideological or theological or philosophical, all of these ideas are actually Confucian ideas. And I encourage you, as we engage with the story this morning, to think about the ways in which these Confucian ideas parallel with Christian ideas. And the parallels will be quite clear. It's quite remarkable. So I'm honored to present to you on this first day of the lunar year, Legend of the Black Snake. Many moons ago, in those days when people lived for hundreds of years and pine trees transformed themselves into men, when one heard a distant melody on the wind and believed it was a song of the great phoenix, in those days there lived a boy named Smudge. Smudge was very strong-willed, although I did not observe that in him until he was much older. He was called Smudge because his face always seemed streaked with dirt, the dark black soil of the hills of China, where he lived with an old woman.
Smudge, what's up before dinner?
Yes, Auntie. I should explain. Smudge did not have any living relatives. He called the old woman Auntie out of respect and affection. One cold winter night, when he was 12, Smudge asked the old woman where he came from.
You were once a snake, a black snake.
Yes, but you've never explained to me how I got to be here with you.
Well, every year, on the first day of the new year, you shed your skin. And every year, you prayed you would leave your black skin behind you forever. I don't know why. I thought it was very handsome myself. Anyway, every year, your new skin was still black. I believe you got tired of being a black snake. So you came to me.
And
I taught you how to transform yourself into a human being through Confucian art of ritual. And you did, after about 200 years.
200 years?
You were very stubborn, very selfish. A snake always prefers to go along his own way and live by himself. Anyway, 200 years is not that long. I once taught a very slow pine tree for over 400 years.
Are you really that old, Auntie?
Oh, yes, my boy.
At that moment, they heard a distant melody on the wind. It rang out like chimes of polished jade.
Listen, it is the song of the great phoenix. She descends from heaven On special days, you must remember this day always.
Yes, yes, Auntie. If you are that old, will you live forever?
Oh, no, my boy. When you are 18, you will leave me and make your way in the world. When you return to visit, if you see a white narcissus blooming in a bed of snow, then you will know I am no longer of this world.
Must I leave you, Auntie?
Oh, yes, Smudge. 218 years is long enough. Now go to sleep. When Smudge turned 18, the old woman pointed him toward the sea. When you arrive at the harbor, you must find the captain. He is older than I, and his face will be golden from the sun. With him will be 2 young men, one tall and lean and slow to speak, and the other short and stout and quick to laugh.
Thank you, Auntie.
The journey took several days. He walked through the village, busy with vendors and villagers. When he arrived at the harbor, he saw many boats lining the docks. A prosperous year of farming had increased the demand for fresh fish. Smudge walked along the docks until he found the old man whose face was golden from the sun. The old man was standing in a boat. Next to him on the dock were 2 younger men. One was tall and lean, and the other was short and stout. The short, stout one smiled and waved. Hey there, how are you? I'm Red.
Smudge, I was sent by the old woman from the hills.
Smudge, this is Twig. Twig, come over here.
The tall, lean man walked over.
Say, Twig, did you hear that? You remember the old woman.
She's so old. When she was a girl, the great phoenix was still an egg.
Ho! Say something, Twig.
His jokes aren't always funny.
Say, you should talk with the captain about joining us. I'm sure there's room for one more. Hey, Captain, look who was sent by the old woman.
Smudge walked over to the old man in the boat.
Which old woman?
She lives in the hills.
What is her name?
I never learned her name.
Describe her.
She is, well, her eyes are, her hair. Wait, her skin is white as snow.
Very well, come along.
Smudge spent his first year on the sea learning how to tie knots.
There is a knot for every purpose. There are certain knots for the sails. There are certain knots for the fishing nets. There are certain knots for docking the boat. You will learn these knots and practice them as you are taught.
Smudge learned the knots. He tied them as he was taught. But one morning, when the captain was not looking, he invented new knots for the sails. After tying them, Smudge smiled and nodded to himself, humming. Later that day, without any warning, the sky turned gray. A storm was approaching fast, very fast.
Quickly, Smudge, take down the sails.
Yes, Captain. But when Smudge went to untie his knot, the new knot he had invented that very morning, he discovered that the salt water had hardened the knot so that he could not untie it. The rain arrived.
Quickly, Smudge.
I know.
Red, help him.
The wind soon followed. The other sail, which Smudge had tied with a different knot, came loose and started flapping wildly in the wind. Twig ran and tried to grab hold of the giant sail. The boat swayed widely from side to side. Twig's face turned green. The captain ran to help. Smudge watched as the enormous canvas sail, wet and heavy from the rain and seawater, wrapped itself around the captain and swept him overboard. "Captain!" Twig quickly caught the sail and brought it down. Then he tied a rope around his chest, took a deep breath, and jumped overboard. Red had brought the other sail down. The boat began to steady. Smudge and Red went over to the side of the boat. They saw Twig bobbing up for air. Blinking through the rain, the three scanned the waters for the captain. Smudge saw an arm extend out of the waves. "Twig, to your left!" Twig spotted the captain, nodded, and then dove underwater. After a long struggle against the waves, he lugged the captain back to the boat. When they returned to the harbor, they brought the captain to a house along the shore, where he began to recover. After 5 days, the captain was well enough to speak. Smudge entered the small room. "Captain, I am sorry. You did not practice as you were taught." "I did, but I kind of got tired of always tying your knots. I wanted something of my own knots." "One of your knots was too tight. It was not flexible enough to be untied when needed. Another of your knots was too loose. It was not secure enough to withstand the winds. Smudge, the knots I taught you are not my own. They have been practiced by me, and the captain before me, and the captain before him, and the captain before him. They have been handed down to us for centuries. They belong to all of us, including you. Those knots are your own knots." "Yes, Captain. I see the snake spirit within you, solitary, selfish. I can't help it. We are each connected with each other. That is what it means to be human. You cannot choose otherwise. You cannot do something new on your own without considering others. In your selfishness, you put all of us in danger." "I'm sorry, Captain." "Before Twig dove in to rescue me, you know what he did? He tied a rope around his chest. That rope allowed him to remain connected with the boat. Without that rope, he and I both would have drowned. Smudge, we are not solitary. Without connection, we cannot live." "Yes, Captain." "You shall learn. Twig and Red shall teach you." "What about you?" "My fishing days are over. Now go. I need my rest." It was Twig who took charge of the fishing boat. Each time they returned to the harbor, the three young men shared their adventures with the captain. The time when Red was bitten by a shark. The time when Smudge almost caught a fish larger than himself. The years went by, and when the captain passed away, they scattered his ashes upon the sea. Smudge was 23 when he finally caught a fish larger than himself. "Hey, Smudge, way to go! Hey, Twig, come here, you gotta see this. This fish is so big." "Throw it back." "Why?" "Throw it back? Twig, you gotta be kidding. This is a beauty. I'm telling you, it's so big that..." "Throw it back." "No. No one will buy it. It's almost New Year. Families will serve fish at their celebrations." "Smudge, are you so selfish that you have become blind to the world around you? Do you not know that many crops have failed this year? No one today can afford a fish as large as this.
He does have a point, Smudge. But it's mine.
Twig walked over to the giant fish, picked it up, and threw it back into the sea. Smudge looked down at the water, looked up at Twig, and then dove overboard. The water was cold and murky. Smudge looked for the fish but did not see it. He looked up at the boat. Red was shouting, "Hey, come back, Smudge!" Smudge turned away from the boat, turned toward the shore, and began to swim. The current carried him quickly back to the harbor. There were very few boats as he walked along the docks, and in the village, vegetable stands and rice stalls were empty. He continued walking, following the path that led to the hills, which were covered by a blanket of fresh white snow. When Smudge arrived at the old woman's house, it was silent and cold. "Auntie? Auntie!" Outside, he saw a white narcissus blooming in a bed of snow, and he began to cry. At that moment, he heard a distant melody on the wind. It rang out like chimes of polished jade. "You must remember this day always." Smudge followed the song into the hills. He scaled higher and higher. A fine white mist filled the air. His breathing became heavy. He began to stumble as he walked. Finally, he stopped, resting on a short, stout rock. He looked up. The old woman was standing before him. She was in robes, white like snow. Next to the old woman was the captain. He was also in robes, gold like the sun. And out of the fine white mist, I appeared. Smudge's eyes widened. The great phoenix. He took in the sight of me, my regal beak, my dazzling eyes, my magnificent wings with feathers, white, gold, red as an agate stone, green as a pine tree, and black as a snake. I flapped my wings and hovered. Smudge stood up and began to climb a tall, lean tree next to the rock. At that moment, great music rang out, a fragrant melody on chimes of polished, shimmering jade. Smudge stared. This music was not coming from me, but from above me. This was not my song, the song of the great phoenix, as many had believed. This was a song of heaven. Smudge climbed higher to a higher branch. The music got louder. He climbed higher, and then, without warning, a branch broke. His foot slipped, and he fell to the ground. It was night when he came to. He looked around. Where are the others? What day is it? I smiled at him. It is the first of the new year. Look, black snake, you have shed your skin. Between the short, stout rock and the tall, lean tree lay his recently shed skin. He turned his small head and took in the sight of his black, serpentine body. Great phoenix, must I always be black as dirt? Why compare yourself to the soil beneath you? Look upward to the heavens. But there is no moon on the first night of the new year. What color do you see? I see the silver of the stars. What else? Nothing. Not nothing. Look, what color do you see? Black. The heavens are black, like my skin. He looked down at his long, slender body. His iridescent black scales sparkled, reflecting the silver of the stars. I am a mirror of heaven. Yes, Black Snake. I must return to the boat and red and twig. Yes. But first you must sleep. When you wake, you will be human again. Tomorrow, the new year continues. Will I ever see you again, Great Phoenix? No, Smudge, but I will continue to watch over you as I have all these years. I stayed with him until he fell asleep, and then I lifted my head, spread my magnificent wings, and flew off into the dark black skies over the hills of China.